During a live French television broadcast, a well-known host made a bold and disrespectful comment about President Ibrahim Traoré's military attire, thinking it would be a passing joke. But what followed stunned the audience and shook the entire studio. Ibrahim's calm, yet powerful, comeback sent a message that the entire world heard loud and clear. This moment quickly became an unforgettable headline, and for good reason. The French TV studio was bright, flashy, and loud. It was a live broadcast of one of France's biggest political shows. Millions were watching across Europe and Africa. And tonight's guest was President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. Dressed as usual in his military uniform, calm, focused, and proud. But then the host let out a sharp laugh. He leaned into the camera and, with a grin, asked, "Tell me, Mr. President, is it wartime in your studio too?" The audience laughed nervously. It wasn't just a joke. It was disrespect. The room went silent. Cameras continued to roll, and the host smiled, thinking he had scored a point. But Ibrahim didn't smile back. He gently adjusted his collar, looked at the host, and then directly into the camera like he was speaking to every child in Burkina Faso watching from dusty living rooms. His lips moved slowly. "This uniform is not decoration. It's pain, sacrifice, and the blood of those who can't speak here today. I wear it so the voiceless are seen." The studio fell completely silent, and that's when the real storm began. For several seconds, the studio froze. The host blinked, unsure of what to say. Ibrahim Traoré didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry. But in that silence, everyone in the room felt something strange in their chest, guilt, maybe shame. It was palpable, continued quietly. "This uniform is for the mother who lost her son protecting a school, for the child who sleeps with the sound of gunfire. For a country that bleeds but never bows." There were no more jokes. The comment didn't feel funny anymore. The laughter from minutes ago suddenly felt like a wound. A woman working behind the camera wiped her eyes. The host's smile faded. People watching across Africa began recording their screens and tweeting clips with the words "respect," "honor," "Traoré." In Ouagadougou, people gathered around TVs in silence. One woman whispered to her neighbor, "That's our leader," spoke. "For all of us." The show cut to a commercial break, but it was too late. The moment had already gone viral. By the time the cameras came back on, Ibrahim Traoré wasn't finished yet. When the show returned, Ibrahim turned his chair slightly, not toward the host, but toward the audience watching at home. "You see a uniform?" he said gently. "Let me tell you what I see." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded, faded photo. It was small, old, and torn at the edges. He held it up to the camera. "This is my best friend Moussa. We trained together. We dreamed of building schools, not bunkers. We fought side by side. He never came home." The camera zoomed in on the photo. Moussa looked young, kind, proud, full of life. Ibrahim's voice cracked just a little as he continued. "His mother still cooks his favorite rice every Sunday, hoping the smell is strong enough to bring him back. I visit her when I can. Don't wear this uniform for me. I wear it for him." The host looked down, clearly overwhelmed. Words had become too heavy to speak. People across the world, from Paris to Abidjan to rural Burkina Faso, felt their eyes burn. The photo, the pain, the honesty. It was no longer about clothing. It was about memory. And the uniform had become a symbol of something too deep to ignore. The studio lights felt hotter now. Cameras captured every breath. Ibrahim Traoré placed the photo of Moussa gently on the table. He wasn't performing. He was remembering. When Moussa died, he continued, his voice steady but heavy. "I couldn't cry. I was holding a rifle, not a handkerchief.
Ow.
I was holding a country." The host looked up, his face filled with shame, as if realizing that his joke had crossed into something sacred. Ibrahim glanced at him, not with anger, but with something deeper understanding. "You see comedy," he said softly. "We live conflict. You wear suits in warm studios. We wear uniforms under bullets." In the back row of the audience, a young intern, barely older than 20, quietly wiped her cheeks. She had never seen a president speak like this, not on TV, not with this kind of rawness. Outside the studio, clips of the broadcast spread like Wildfire on social media. People began adding Dinhal Istand with Rower to their posts. In Burkina Faso, cafes erupted in applause. Mothers cried. Young soldiers stood straighter. For the first time in a long time, people didn't just see a president, they saw a brother. Backstage during the commercial break, Traore's phone vibrated. It was a voice message from a number he hadn't saved, but he recognized the voice. Instantly, Mouse's mother. It's me. He closed his eyes as her soft, trembling words filled the silence. I saw you on TV, you still carry him. Thank you for not letting the world forget. He didn't reply. He couldn't. His throat tightened, and for a moment, even the strongest man in the room felt like a son again. When he returned to the stage, the energy had shifted. The audience, once just curious, now sat on the edge of their seats. The host, flustered, tried to change the topic. Let's talk politics, he suggested. But Ibrahim held up a hand gently. No, he said. Tonight I'm not here for politics. I'm here for truth. He looked directly into the camera once more. Africa doesn't need pity. We need respect. Not applause, but understanding. The silence that followed was louder than any applause could have been. Back in Burkina Faso, children huddled around radios. Grandfathers leaned in closer to TVs. And in that moment, the entire continent leaned in as well. By midnight, the clip had reached over 10 million views, not just in Burkina Faso, but also in Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria, and even France. Young people shared it with captions like, "This is how a leader speaks." He didn't raise his voice, but he raised all of ours. Even major news outlets that often ignored African voices had picked it up. The African president who silenced a studio with dignity. One headline read, "In the studio, the host, once smug, now looked human and humbled." The host, now unsure of how to continue, leaned forward and quietly asked, "What drives you, Mr. President?" Traore smiled softly, a sadness in his eyes. "Every morning I wake up and ask one question. How do I honor the dead without failing the living?" The audience held their breath. "Leadership is not pride," he continued. "It's not a title. It's a promisand sometimes. A heavy one." The studio was no longer just a stage. It had become a memorial, a school, a mirror. And across the globe, people didn't just watch, they felt, they wept. And for the first time, the world was truly listening. When the show ended, Ibrahim Traoré stood slowly, adjusted his uniform, and gave a small nod to the audience. Didn't smile, he didn't wave, he just walked. The host awkwardly called after him, "Merci, Mr. President." But Ibrahim didn't answer. His silence said everything. As he exited the studio, a young technician approached him, tears in his eyes. "Mom, President," he said. "My father served in Mali. He never came back. Thank you for making him visible tonight." Ibrahim placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. He is seen and never forgotten. That quiet exchange, captured by a behind-the-scenes camera, was posted online. Within hours, it had 12 million views. People weren't just watching, they were sobbing. In Burkina Faso, a teacher paused her lesson to play the clip for her class. "This," she whispered, "is how history is written." In villages without internet, elders retold the story word by word, like poetry passed through generations. Ibrahim didn't scream, he didn't threaten, but his silence thundered louder than gunfire. That night, the world didn't just hear a leader, they felt one. 2 days after the broadcast, Ibrahim sat alone in his guest room in Paris. No security. No noise, just him, his boots, and a letter that had been slipped under his door. It was handwritten, fragile, ink smudged in places. It read, "Monsieur le Président, I am a former soldier. I served during colonial operations in Africa many years ago. I was told we were helping, but now I know we weren't. Watching you on that stage broke something in me, and it healed something too. I'm sorry for the things we did, for the things we ignored. You spoke for more than your people. You spoke for all of us who wish we could turn back time. Please accept this medal. I no longer deserve it." Jean-Pierre Dumas, age 84, inside the envelope was an old French military medal, dusty, heavy with memory. Ibrahim stared at it for a long time. before placing it beside his boots. He didn't speak, but for the second time in 2 days. He felt the tears rise not for himself, but for all the stories that were finally being heard. On the flight back to Burkina Faso, the clouds were thick, and rain pressed against the windows, like soft drum beats. Ibrahim stared outside, thinking about the letter, about Moussa, about the young technician, about his people waiting for him. His advisor, seated beside him, broke the silence. "Mr. President, your speech is being taught in schools now, even in France." Ibrahim turned slightly, eyebrows raised. "Taught, yes. As an example of how dignity defeats mockery." He nodded slowly. Then it wasn't a speech, it was a seed. The plane began its descent. Through the mist, the lights of Ouagadougou sparkled like stars on the ground. On the runway, people had gathered with candles and flags. Some held up pictures of lost soldiers. Others held signs, "Not our president, our brother." We are all in uniform. Respect is power. When Ibrahim stepped off the plane, a boy no older than 7 ran up to him, barefoot, soaked in the rain. He didn't say a word, just hugged his leg. And for once, the cameras didn't zoom in. They knew this moment wasn't for them, it was for the people. The night after Ibrahim's return to Burkina Faso, his phone rang quietly. It was from the north, a remote village near the Mali border, a place often forgotten, even by maps. A trembling voice spoke. "Monsieur le President, this is Adama. My son was one of the soldiers killed last year defending this land. I saw you on TV, wearing your uniform, speaking with fire but no anger. That night, for the first time since he died, I slept." Ibrahim closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. "Madame," he whispered, "I wore that uniform for your son." She wept softly, gratefully. The line went silent, but that single call opened something inside Ibrahim. A flood of memories, of names, of lives lost. Young men who had no suits, no speeches, only their blood and loyalty. That night, he quietly ordered something, without cameras or press, something that would stand for generations. A wall not made of stone, but of names. Every fallen soldier's name would be engraved, not hidden in the capital, but placed in the center of the country. Where children could run their fingers over it and remember. The people wouldn't have to search for their heroes. They'd walk. Among them, love poured in from across Africa. Backlash rose from elsewhere. French political commentators accused Ibrahim of emotional manipulation and called his silence on the show dangerous posturing. Some even questioned whether he deserved to wear the uniform. But Ibrahim didn't flinch. Instead, he invited his critics to come visit Burkina Faso, to meet the mothers, to walk the red soil, to see the faces behind the uniform. None accepted, but something unexpected happened. A French widow, once married to a peacekeeper stationed in Ouagadougou, sent him a message. "President Traore, your strength made me revisit my husband's journals. He wrote about you," once said. "You reminded him of a lion who walks slowly so the sheep won't panic." That message went viral. Suddenly, Ibrahim wasn't just a leader. He had become a symbol of what it meant to carry pain with grace. That day, the rain returned to Ouagadougou. Children played barefoot in it. Old women prayed with open hands, because when storms came now, they didn't hide. They stood tall, like their president. 3 days after Ibrahim's return, he received a large brown envelope. Inside was a child's drawing, showed a man in uniform standing under a giant tree, arms wide open. Around him were tiny stick figures holding flags. The caption, written in crooked handwriting, read, "Papa says, you are not just a president. You are the big tree we hide under when the sun burns." Izata, age 6, Ibrahim stared at the drawing for a long time. His advisor watched him closely. "Should we frame it, sir?" he asked. Ibrahim nodded. "Yes, in my office right above the national flag." At that moment, he said something no one expected. "Tomorrow, I will go to the border. Alone." "Alone?" his advisor asked, surprised. "Yes, not as president, as a soldier." He wasn't running from anything. He was walking toward everything he represented. No guards, no suits, just the same boots he wore during his youth. He carried Isada's drawing in his jacket, right above his heart. Because sometimes the truest shields are made of paper and crayons, and sometimes the strongest men carry not weapons, but the weight of their people's love. On the 6th day, Ibrahim Traoré arrived quietly at a military outpost near the border. No camera crew, no red carpet. He stepped out of the old military jeep and was greeted by a young soldier, no older than 19. The boy stood frozen, shocked. "Are you really the president?" the young soldier asked. Ibrahim smiled. "Only if you let me be today." He spent hours walking with the soldiers, sharing stories, eating their food, listening to their fears. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, a small boy from the nearby village walked up to him, barefoot, holding something in his hand. It was a toy gun made of wood, tied together with string. He held it out to Ibrahim. "This is for you. My papa says only real men wear uniforms with their heart." Ibrahim knelt down and took the toy gun with both hands, as if it were a golden sword. "Thank you," he said. "I will protect it with my life." Ow. No one at the camp slept the same that night. Something had shifted. The president had come, not to command, but to remember. While Ibrahim walked barefoot through villages, the media storm in France grew hotter. Clips of the broadcast now had millions of views. The host who mocked Ibrahim's uniform tried to apologize online, but it was too late. The world had seen something too real, too raw. Young Africans began wearing camouflage clothes, calling it the Traore uniform. Artists drew him as a tree rooted in history, with children under his shade. Even some French citizens began asking, why did we laugh at a man's scars instead of asking how he got them? Meanwhile, Ibrahim stayed silent until he received one final request from a school in Paris. They were having a week of African leadership and wanted to invite him as a closing speaker. His advisors said, "It's too soon." But Ibrahim smiled. Gently, it's never too soon to teach a lesson. And so, the world waited to see what would come next from their president, quiet, humble, yet steadfast and full of heart. The tension in the room was palpable, but Ibrahim simply replied, "It's not about comfort. It's about clarity." He accepted, not with anger, but with a message that the world didn't know it was about to hear. He would return to Paris, but this time not to be interviewed. This time he would speak. The day arrived, the 7th day, 1 full week since the broadcast that had shocked the world. The auditorium in Paris was packed, not just with students, but also journalists, professors, mothers, and politicians, everyone waiting for Ibrahim. He walked in, still wearing his military uniform. Not polished, not new, but worn, truthful. He stood silently at the podium, taking a deep breath before he began. "I did not come here to defend my clothes," he started, his voice steady. "I came here to speak for those who have none." He paused. "For the girls who walk 10 kilometers barefoot to school, the widows who whisper prayers over empty beds, the soldiers whose names you will never read on the news." You could hear the audience holding their breath. "My uniform is not fashion," he continued. "It is a funeral cloth wrapped around a promise." A tear rolled down the cheek of a French African teacher in the front row. Ibrahim's voice softened. "I wear this not because I want to be feared, but because I refuse to forget." The room was still for a moment, then one clap, 2, and soon the entire audience stood, giving him a standing ovation. Even the host who had mocked him stood up, his hands shaking. That night, the Eiffel Tower lit up in the colors of Burkina Faso. Across the world, Ibra cried not for pain, but for pride. Later that evening, after the speech that shook Paris, Ibrahim sat alone in his quiet hotel room. He opened a small envelope, a letter flown in from Ouagadougou just that morning. It was from a 9-year-old girl named Ah. She had written in pencil, with words that tilted across the page, "Dear President Ibrahim, my papa died in his uniform. Mama cries every night, but she says you are brave like papa. Please don't stop wearing it. When I grow up, I want to wear one too. Lavawa." Ibrahim gently pressed the letter to his chest. His eyes welled with tears, but this time, he didn't wipe them. Not this time.
Outside,
The media buzzed. Interviews continued, but inside that quiet room, the real battle was being won. Dignity, identity, legacy. In that moment, Ibrahim wasn't just a leader or a soldier. He was a father to every child who had ever wondered if their story mattered. And somewhere across the world, little Awa smiled in her sleep, not knowing that she had just given the president the courage to face the final day. The next morning, back at the TV studio where it all began, something unexpected happened. The host, the same man who had once laughed at Ibrahim's uniform, requested to meet him off camera. Ibrahim agreed. They met in a quiet hallway. The host stood with lowered eyes, holding something in his hands. It was a framed photo of his grandfather, a Senegalese soldier in World War II in uniform. "I forgot," the host whispered. "I forgot what this uniform means. Forgot where I come from." Ibrahim looked at the photo, then at the man. "We don't need to cancel each other," he said softly. "We need to remind each other." The host nodded, tears silently falling.
Ow.
No cameras, no press release. Just two men in a moment of truth. A handshake followed, and with it, a ripple began across France. People stopped scrolling and started thinking. For the first time in years, a conversation about African dignity, history, and honor was louder than politics. And it had begun with a joke and ended with a mirror. The final day of the week arrived, and Ibrahim returned to Burkina Faso. There was no parade, no celebration, just families waiting at the airport, children waving homemade flags, and an old woman handing him a bowl of tea, a traditional meal, whispering, "Welcome home, son," he smiled. Later that night, he stood before a small group of orphans who had lost their parents to terrorism. He wore the same uniform, the same boots, but this time, he added something new, a patch on his chest, sewn with little Awa's handwriting. "Be brave like Papa." He looked at the children and said, "One day, you will all wear something powerful. Maybe not cloth, but courage. And when you do, wear it with your heart." The children clapped. Some cried. And Ibrahim made a quiet promise under the stars. "For every life lost, I will live. Better, for every tear shed, I will fight smarter. And for every child watching, I will never remove this uniform of truth." He didn't just walk away that night. He rose as a symbol not of power, but of purpose. Dear amazing viewers, if this story moved your heart even just a little, please do these three things. Like this video if you believe dignity should always be respected. Comment the word courage if you were touched by President Ibrahim's journey. Subscribe if you want to see more true, powerful African stories that make the world stop and feel. Let's remind the world what real leadership looks like, not with noise, but with truth. Long live dignity. Long live hope. Long live Burkina Faso.